probably heard that the Buddha has declared the 10 Saṃyojana, the 10 fetters. And these are the fetters that fetter us into the endless round of getting born, aging, dying, and being reborn, dying, being reborn. And these 10 fetters is what keeps us coming back. And coming back is what keeps us dying. So if we do abandon the 10 fetters, that is freedom, that is release, that is nibbana, that is the end of samsara, the cycle of birth and death, ended when the 10 Saṃyojanas, the 10 fetters are abandoned. And the third of these fetters is called clinging to rites and rituals. That's usually the translation in English. In Pali it's Silabbataparamasa. Silabbataparamasa, usually translated as clinging to rites and rituals. So if clinging to rites and rituals is a fetter, why do we pay respects to the Buddha then? Why do we do these rituals like the monks are chanting a blessing? Why do we do a big stupa event? Can you figure that? Do you know what is the crucial point there? Someone suggests there has to be a foundation to keep people going in their practice, but at some stage one has to let go. Yes, I would agree. Now, the crucial point is, so imagine you have got two people, and they're both bowing to the Buddha. You cannot tell whether this is clinging to rites or rituals, or whether not, unless you can see the mind. Because that is a crucial one. It depends when they bow, when they do the ritual, what is actually going on in the mind. For example, someone growing up maybe in a traditional Buddhist country or having Buddhist parents, they may be told as a little child, whenever you see the Buddha statue, you have to bow. And if they don't bow, they get punished. If they do bow, they get rewarded. Oh, good boy, good girl. And then someone bows to the Buddha simply out of that conditioning. Without any understanding, without any faith. Simply being conditioned by, if you bow, you get rewarded. If you don't bow, then you get punished. Now that could be called clinging to rites and rituals. This is actually even more basic. This is just a conditioning process without any understanding. The other person may be bowing to the Buddha because they have confidence and faith in the Buddha. And they want to express that. And they want to make that confidence and faith in the Buddha stronger. And they want to uplift their mind. They want to feel more joyful, more radiant, more bright in their mind. And with this intention now they bow. With this intention now they make a Buddha puja. With this intention they offer flowers. So it's a completely different understanding. The one person doing it out of conditioning, the other person doing it with understanding, and in particular with an understanding, what is the ritual actually doing to my mind? If someone is doing it only out of conditioning, that is not even so much Silabbataparamasa. Maybe a different example. Someone thinks, if I manage to do 1,000,000 bows to the Buddha, then I attain Nibbana. And they have the strong belief, and if I bow 1,000,000 times, then this is enough. By then I will be enlightened. This would be a classic Silabbataparamasa. It's not just conditioning, but additionally they have that belief that just the external action can cause them to become enlightened. And then they obviously will bow a lot. But if all they do is bowing, and just using the body to do that movement, even if they do it 1 billion times, it will not be enough to become enlightened. Because awakening, release, nibbana, has to be a change and development in the mind. It has to be an insight into the nature of reality, into the nature of conditioned phenomena, and the resultant letting go. It's not something that can be done with external activities. This is the main thing that Silabbataparamasa refers to. There's someone believing that they can get to nibbana, to total freedom, by external activities. Whereas someone who has a deeper understanding of Dhamma, they may be doing exactly the same movement. It may look exactly the same when they bow, but their understanding in the mind is different. And when the person with understanding is doing any ritual, any practice, even just keeping precepts, even just offering Dāna, they always do that with an understanding and an intention of changing their mind in a positive way. For example, quite amazingly, when we lower ourselves, and if we bow to something that is worthy of veneration, although we lower the body and we humble ourselves, but the mind is actually uplifted, you feel happy, you feel uplifted. If it is something really truly good and admirable, and you express your respect and veneration while doing that, the mind will actually be uplifted. The body goes down, the mind goes up. That's fascinating. And then someone has noticed that. Maybe they actually started with that conditioning. They were just told by the parents, when you see the Buddha, you have to bow. But maybe when they did that, they had also a bit of respect. And then they gradually started noticing that expressing my respect to someone worthy of respect actually feels good. And it makes my mind brighter. It makes my mind more joyful. Maybe they also notice it helps against arrogance and conceit and big-headedness and haughtiness. And then they bow with that purpose, with that understanding. And this is a crucial point for your whole Buddhist practice. Everything you do, you always have to check out, what does it actually do with my mind? What is the impact onto my mind? It's the same with keeping precepts. The 5 precepts: not to kill any living being, not even insects, intentionally. Not to steal, not to commit adultery or other forms of sensual misconduct, not to lie, and not to take alcohol or other drugs that cause intoxication, that erode the sense of shame and conscience, and that weaken mindfulness. Now again, someone may have been told that they should be doing that, and then they're keeping that. And for sure, there's lots of good karma. And it prevents a lot of good karma, even if you keep these precepts without understanding. But if you're a true Dhamma practitioner, you have an additional purpose. You not only want to avoid making bad karma, you not only want to generate good karma by keeping the precepts, but you have maybe read how the Buddha described them. The Buddhisani, they're actually freeing. They're meant to free you, to free your heart. Often people feel when I keep precepts it's restrictive. I'm less free. If I can't do these things, it appears like a limitation, and that may be true for the body, or for the things you can do with your body and your speech. Certain things you can't do, you keep the precepts. But for the mind, the effect is the opposite. It actually frees the mind. It frees the mind from always having to follow craving. It frees the mind from always to follow your desires and your dislikes and your aversions. Now, most people don't perceive that as slavery or as restriction. Now, the worldly definition of freedom is whatever I like to do, that I do. Whatever I don't like to do, I don't do. This sounds like great freedom. What I desire, I do. What I hate, no, I don't do it, I get rid of. But if you analyze it, no, you're totally unfree if you live like that. If any desire arises, no, you just have to go after it. Where's the freedom? If you don't like something, you have to get rid of it. Where's the freedom? You're functioning like a slave, like a robot, and a slave to the defilement. Whereas when you keep the precepts, that is the first time when there's a limit. And even if you get really angry, because a mozzie is buzzing around you and already tried 5 times to bite you and you can't sleep and you try to sleep, you've got an important thing tomorrow. And you may feel like this mozzie deserves to die now, and then that's the only way of getting, you don't do it. You don't follow that desire, you don't follow that anger. And this is actually freeing you. It is freeing you from having to follow desires and aversion and likes and dislikes. So someone with a deeper Dhamma understanding is keeping the precepts not only to prevent bad karma, but they're keeping these precepts to free their mind, to liberate themselves from being a slave to the defilements. And then the very important, the last one the Buddha mentioned, samādhi sangha. The stream enterer has these precepts well established. Samādhi sangha, leading to samādhi. You understand, if you keep these precepts for a long time, your mind will be free from remorse. Your mind will be free from regret, compunction, and worrying, and this darkness from understanding one did something bad. You have freedom from that, freedom from remorse. And that is a form of happiness. The Buddha also called it the anavajja sukha, the blameless happiness. And a person with Dhamma understanding actually wants that happiness. And this is not wrong. This is good, this is what we should do. So you're keeping the precepts not only to protect others from harm, not only to protect yourself from harm and bad karma, but you're keeping them for something which may almost sound, if the understanding isn't so good, a bit egoistic. Because you want the happiness from being a person who has no remorse. You want the happiness from being a blameless person and knowing that. And that is part of the path. Wanting that happiness is actually something good. And that shows a deeper understanding. So you keep the precepts, not just to prevent bad karma and not to harm others, but additionally you keep them to free your mind from always having to follow like a slave your desires and aversions and likes and dislikes. Because each time, I'm sure you have encountered that, if you try to keep precepts, occasionally there comes this pressure, embarrassing situation, and it looks like with some little lie you can get out without embarrassment. No, but you don't do that. this hard stop for the defilements. They're still there and we haven't abandoned them yet. But once they hit the limitation of that precept, and you don't go any further. And to that extent, then you're no longer a slave to that defilement. It is limited now. But the even more important one, you want that happiness from having no remorse, from knowing you're a person who can't really be rightfully blamed for any major transgression if you keep just these 5 precepts. And that feels really, really good. And the longer you keep these precepts, the stronger that happiness will be. And if your Dhamma understanding is good, you're not doing it only to get this happiness, but now you want to use that happiness. Of course, the happiness doesn't need any particular use, it feels good in itself. But you can go even further. So why do you want this happiness? Apart from that it feels good. Is there something even more important about that happiness from being a good, blameless person without remorse? Is there something even more important than just feeling good?
As a basis for practicing samadhi?
Exactly. Because that is the way to experience unification of mind. Pamodja, piti, passaddhi, sukha, samadhi. The gladness. When someone experiences gladness, they can mature into rapture. When the person experiences rapture, the body will become completely tranquil, calm and at ease. When the body is tranquil, then the mind will be blissful. And the blissful mind will unify in samadhi. It's not just sitting there and doing the hours, or trying to think, I have to be more skillful with the meditation as object. Now, this is of course also a part of it. But the crucial ingredient that the Buddha describes is this pamodja, piti, passaddhi, sukha, samadhi. Gladness, rapture, tranquility, bliss, unification of mind. And you want to use that happiness from being a blameless person to deepen into gladness, into rapture and so on. Exactly. With the understanding that then the samadhi is also not the final thing, but that the samadhi is a crucial ingredient for seeing things as they truly are. Samadhi is crucial for fully developing the Eightfold Path and the 7 factors of enlightenment, and to realize enlightenment. Now that is the understanding for this whole process. And when you keep precepts, that is the intention. And when you do the ritual of formally committing to the 5 precepts, that's all in the background. You can see another person, they may also do the body movements, they may not even have an intention of keeping the precepts. Externally it may look the same. One person who is just feeling maybe embarrassed, they're joining for the monastery, and then somehow a monk is giving the precepts, they join the motions, they don't even have the intention of keeping them. But externally you can't distinguish that, and it looks the same. The second person, they actually have the intention of keeping the precepts, and they have the understanding that is better for them to protect them from bad karma, and they understand that they don't want to harm others. It's obviously already much better. But the third person is the one who also does it to protect others and himself or herself. But additionally, they understand that if I really keep these precepts, I will get the blameless happiness. And once I have the blameless happiness, and that becomes stronger, And then also, of course, supported from the other factors and parts of my Dhamma practice, and it will develop into gladness, rapture, tranquility, bliss, and unification of mind. Now, this is a person who is not stuck in Silabbataparamasa in any which way. Now, they have full understanding. Everything they do is actually always aiming for this ultimate liberation of mind. It's integrated path into that. And interestingly, it's the same with generosity. So, I mean, all you guys, you came today to practice generosity, you came and offered food. So why did you do that? Have you worked it out? Why did you do that? Why did you come and offer food to the monks and maybe other things? Oh, feels good, yeah. This you're getting on the right track. How about karma? Anyone here wanted to make good karma with that? Yeah, no, for sure. No? It's obviously very good karma to offer food, even just to offer a carrot to a horse. There's lots of good karma. Offering some carrots and rice and so on, and curries to the monks, to the sangha. It's a very, very great good karma. And of course, if one has that understanding, then it's already no longer pure conditioning or clinging. But I like that you already said because it feels good. Because that is even more important ultimately for the practice to enlightenment than the future good karma. If you make lots of good karma and by offering things, you may be reborn in the Deva world. And you may enjoy in a long life all kinds of divine happiness for millions and millions of years in human reckoning. That's obviously already a lot. But it's not as good as enlightenment, as awakening. And again, a person who has a deep understanding, they will do generosity, they will make punya, boon, to give them that happiness. Because that is a happiness which is not coming from sensuality. It's not a happiness that gives you a hangover. It's quite funny now, all these sensual happinesses, they usually have some drawback. Once you spend all night playing a video game or watching YouTube, next day you're just spaced out. And more extreme things like drugs and alcohol and so on, that can be quite a bad hangover. But making good karma is a way of making us happy without a hangover. And the person notices, if I continue doing that, this actually accumulates. This is a big difference to sensual happiness. Sensual happiness, you have to take the drug, I mean, even if it's only, say, having nice food, and then you get a kick right after that, but it doesn't really last. And in a sense, you get even more addicted. Once you try to get all your happiness from eating, you have to eat more and more. And in a sense, you're not accumulating happiness. You're more like accumulating neediness. Because once you try to get your happiness from sensual gratification, you have to get more and more into that. You may have noticed usually one has to increase the dosage. Just doing the same thing that doesn't give you the same kick anymore. However, with punya, with good karma, it's different. You can accumulate that. And once you really notice that, if you have that mindfulness to notice that in your mind, oh, good karma feels so good, and then you do more, and then you notice how just generally in the background you become more and more happy. And then you go for that. Because again, you realize that is what leads to samādhi. You're not doing it only to feel happy, but you want to use that happiness to trigger the process of gladness, rapture, tranquility, bliss, unification of mind, the samādhi. You make your practice of boon, of punya, of bin, the part of your development towards samādhi and insight and freedom, liberation. The Buddha called it citta alankara, citta padikara, your generosity. The motivation for your generosity is that you want to beautify the mind. You want to wear your good karma like jewelry for the mind, the beautification of the mind. Padikara is an equipment, an accessory. You want to equip the mind with that happiness, with that goodness, with that brightness. Instead of happiness, you could also say brightness. The bright in the sense of light. The mind is bright and radiant, which the happy mind tends to be. And this is what one wants to achieve, quite deliberate. So whatever you do then, whether it's keeping precepts, whether it's practicing generosity, whether it's bowing to the Buddha, whether it's attending a stupa ceremony, you always understand that it will influence that process of development. There's nothing egoistic about wanting to be happy in a wholesome way and then using that happiness towards developing samādhi and then using that samādhi for developing insight. And then that insight resulting in letting go and awakening and freedom. Okay, a few reflections on Silabbata and the opposite to truly understanding the meaning of all the rituals and Dhamma activities we are doing. What is the relationship of practicing generosity to letting go? The way that is, I think, quite apparent, because what you give away, you have to let go of. You may sometimes notice that with the offering to the monks, because you have to let go, and then the monks only have received it after you let go. So one thing is giving, the second thing is then to truly let go of that. Peter got the crash course already on that. And it's funny in the sense that people give the food and put it on maybe the cloth, or the monk takes it and then they hold on to it. But it's only received once the monks had it and the lay person lets go. So this is one simile, or one thing which is meant to show that also. So whenever we give, it has the aspect of letting go. Because either it's some material object, and then you let go of it, or you buy it with your money, and then you let go of money. However, this is obviously not sufficient to attain full nibbana, because we are not only attached only to material objects. There's so much where we are mentally attached. So you're using the practice now of letting go of material things to generate that mental happiness, so that you can develop samādhi, because samādhi is also a lot of letting go. Samādhi is letting go of sensuality. I talked about the aspect that samādhi is developed through this strong happiness, gladness, rapture, tranquility, bliss, then unification. But you can also describe it as letting go of sensuality. And you cannot let go of sensuality just by giving material things away. That is not fully enough. But the happiness you get from giving material things away will then support you in the internal letting go of sensuality, which means attaining samādhi. It's so important to understand you have to do these two things. You need the happiness, You also need the letting go of sensuality. Without these two, even if you sit many, many hours, it will not really work. And you may know people, or you may have tried it yourself, and you sit many hours, but why can't I get samadhi? It's not just the hours sitting there. The question is whether the hours sitting there provide you in building up that happiness and bliss, and whether the hours sitting there effect letting go of sensuality, and also the other four hindrances. As your Dhamma practice progresses, you will quite naturally focus on the more refined aspects. Practicing generosity is not yet on such a high refined level as working with the mind with metta or anapanasati. But they support each other. The other important thing is you can also simply reflect on your generosity. And if there's not that much happiness, and sometimes the problem is not that the person is not generous, the problem is more that they're not really reflecting on that. And someone as outrageously generous like yourself, I would recommend to deliberately reflect on that. Because that goes together. We talked about that a true Dhamma practitioner practices generosity very deliberately to get that happiness, to very deliberately use that happiness for developing samadhi and then insight and freedom. A good Dhamma practitioner very deliberately keeps precepts to get that happiness of keeping precepts, that blameless happiness, to very deliberately use that happiness again for samadhi and insight. This is why the Buddha so strongly encouraged us to reflect on our generosity, to reflect on our precepts, because that will make the happiness much stronger. And also means you don't have to do acts of generosity all day, every day, because if you only do that, it will be very difficult to ever really center the mind and unify it, because it's too external and too coarse. Someone who's constantly practicing generosity, in helping others, in giving, they're accumulating tremendous amounts of good karma and will make their mind very bright. But for samadhi is also necessary to focus internally and to get more calm and more refined. So for the happiness, it's not only doing the acts of good karma, but reflecting about them and feeling happy about them. And it's the same with the precepts. Remembering that and feeling happy about it. Yes. As someone is pointing out, if you're very generous, you may easily get taken advantage of, and that is true if you don't have wisdom. The wisdom is always the highest of all worldly, of all conditioned qualities. Nibbana is the highest, but of all conditioned qualities, wisdom is the highest. And we have to use wisdom already at the very foundational stages of the path, like generosity. So you're obviously free to use some discernment where you direct your generosity. And if you're concerned about also making your mind happy, you probably get more happiness when you direct your generosity to a purpose where something beneficial is achieved. You can give a lot of money to a con man who's then just using that for taking drugs. You will not be very happy about that usually. So wisdom is just so important, and mindfulness. And then you can quite clearly, you notice this person is just trying to take advantage, and then you're directed somewhere else. Obviously you can direct your generosity where it's most beneficial. Yeah, that is okay. Yeah. I know what you mean. I mean, for example, almost every kind of major charity will have some red tape. Now, once it's a big organization, there will always be some wastage, or some funds may not be used in the ideal way. Now, this is unavoidable. Or even if you just distribute food in a big style, some people may actually be wealthy enough and they just come to save some money. But I think then what you described is the right attitude. If there's only a certain amount which is kind of scammed off by some scammers, then I wouldn't worry too much.
But initiating that, do you collect bad karma, or you have a good...
No, goodness, no.
It doesn't actually, it's just people great and people...
It's not your intention. It's not your intention. You're just trying to be generous and help people. And then if some people take advantage of that, that's obviously not your karma. No. But if you totally concerned, I practice generosity only if I know 100% that no one, even to a little 1%, is taking advantage of that, then it becomes too restrictive. And I think your attitude is very correct. If 90% of your generosity still somehow reaches the intended purpose, this is a good quota. And then you focus on these 80 or 90% that get through, and don't get angry about the 10 or 20% kind of wasted, because you want the happiness. You don't want to. You don't want to get angry from your generosity. Yes.
Ajahn say in case when Ajahn give us Dhamma talk, it's actually an act of Dhamma generosity. Is that right?
Yeah, hopefully, that would be a very good and wholesome motivation. In fact, sometimes I try to remind myself that this is the purpose of the talk. For example, if I'm getting nervous, not so much here, but sometimes if it's a bigger occasion or something, you can obviously be nervous before giving a Dhamma talk. Particularly if you're tired or you don't have much inspiration, you couldn't meditate much, and difficult venue. And I often find that very helpful. And then I remind myself, I'm not here to show others that I can give good Dhamma talks. Or I'm not here so that others will like me. Or that I'm not here that others will praise me for giving good talks or anything like this. Now, these are all not such good motivations. And then I try to remind myself, and I try to give a talk which is beneficial, where people get something out from, where they learn something. And if I remind myself and then try to focus on what is possibly useful for these people to know, then usually I'm not so nervous anymore. I think this is a good, now ideally, obviously, you would want to give your Dhamma talk as an act of true Dhamma sharing based on compassion. But you have to look after your mind, that you don't get defilements coming in. And the most obvious one is popularity, wanting to be popular. This is why we are switching off the comments and the likes on the YouTube channel. Because I don't want to give Dhamma talks here with the motivation that I get more likes and more views. You can't switch off the views. Now I see the views, but then you try not to be too much influenced by that. So that's really important when you give talks.
Ajahn, I got another question. For example,
If you feel a need to advise them, then often it comes influenced by defilements. If it is truly based on compassion and nothing else, you wouldn't have this need. So if you notice that you feel you need to advise that person, you need to admonish them, you need to change them, you need to improve them, that is an indication that it's not pure compassion. It has to do with attachment, it has to do with knowing better, it has to do with changing them so that I feel better or something like that. Be in the watch out whether you feel in need to give this advice or to give that criticism or to give that help. Because if it's truly based on compassion, it feels different. It's not coming from a need. And you could see that the Buddha even needed, the Buddha even got this external impetus from Brahmasampati in asking him. If it's truly compassion, you are not rushing around out of a need to change all these people. And then it tends to be much more effective. Because people will notice that you need to advise them, and then we are immediately not so interested. It feels like by taking your advice, I'm doing you a service now because you need to do that. Whereas if someone does that out of compassion, it feels like they are doing something for me. There's more than 8 billion people on planet Earth. The vast majority will not even be keeping 5 precepts. They will not even have any faith or confidence in the Buddha. And they're just messing around, basically. And the majority will be reborn in quite bad places. This is the reality you live in. So you have to keep that a bit in mind. You will not have the power to change all these people. This is why I say be careful about needing to advise and help. It is quite limited what we can do. And even as a monk it's limited. Even though they come and they worship you and they pay respects and they listen, you notice there's limitations how much you can do. And for a layperson it will be probably even more limited because they already have so much respect to us. But still it's not easy to change other people. So you need equanimity. If you want to help other people, you need a lot of equanimity. You also need a lot of patience. You're trying and it doesn't work. You're trying again, doesn't work. After you've tried 100 times, you may have some good impact on this person, but not on someone else. You're trying and it seems to be getting worse. So you need a lot of equanimity. Compassion, equanimity. It's also the danger that it pulls you down. Okay, I don't want to hold people much longer. We had already a long session. And I also have to do another one 3 p.m. Maybe we close for today. Thank you for your patience.